to episode 226 of The Dive Down, a Magic the Gathering podcast focused on the latest decks, trends, and strategies for the casual spike. My name is Stanislav here in Manchester, and with me on the line from Denver, Colorado, it's one of my original co-hosts from day one, all those many moons ago, none other than Shane, the Shotgun Beeps.
That's what everyone calls me. It's weird. I don't know why. Stanislav, it's early. Oh, it's early for me.
Yeah, not for me, bro.
I can't believe Dave is expecting me to be on camera for whatever video he's going to stitch together for 7 a.m. Sunday morning.
You agreed to this. I didn't spring this on you.
I looked at the receipts. I don't know if Shane actually agreed to 7.
He agreed to 8, and then he said, I want to start earlier. And then I said, okay, 7, and then nothing. And you said, that's great with me. And I was like, me too, Stan.
Yeah, I don't know what I was thinking. So originally we were going to do something very Colorado. We were going to go for like a somewhat morning-y hike, right? So I was like, oh, perfect. Wake up, do the episode, go hike. And it's just proceeded to rain all weekend.
Right.
So, and now I'm just stuck inside rebuilding the computer. You're lucky. So I was going to start rebuilding the computer last night with the parts that had arrived. And I was like, that seems dangerous. Before an episode.
It does seem dangerous. I will say, what was the difference between 7 and 8 and rebuilding the computer? We're going to get up at 7 and rebuild the computer?
No, I was going to do it last night.
I was
going to do that last night, but instead of doing that last night, I watched Mitchell's versus the Machines, which is a much better idea for my overall mental health and happiness.
I see.
Hello, Dave.
Is this the first time we've been on a show together, the three of us, in like 3 or 4 weeks?
It's been a while.
It's been a month since the three of us have been on.
It's been a while.
That's right. And the
Just
third co-host.
Three of us.
One of the other original founding members, the Godfather, Dave, the Duchess, Harbarger.
I like that. I almost like that better than Godfather. I don't mind it. The Duchess, the Duke and the Duchess. That's fine. I decree that we talk about some cards this week. Stan, what do you think?
I think that's fine. We're not only talking about cards. On this week's show, we're also going to recap some of the early data and results from the regional championship that's happening this weekend in Dallas. It is the biggest Pioneer tournament of the summer, unless you're south of the equator, in which case it is winter. That's a little...
Always be respectful.
Little hemisphere humor for you guys. Then we're finally and formally kicking off Lord of the Rings spoiler season. It's our first round of picks to click from Battle of Middle-earth. Will this be another Modern Horizon, or is this more like a modern Second Breakfast?
Wouldn't Modern Horizon be a modern Second Breakfast? I don't know how those are different. Those are both good things, both bad things.
I just feel like Horizon is something that's like in the distance, and Second Breakfast is something that is up close and personal. I don't know.
Which breakfast do you think was bigger, the first one or the second one? Did the Hobbits ever give us any indication in text? Now, we all know George R.R. Martin was a fan of writing about food. A lot of fan about writing about food in detail.
All right, let's housekeep. We do have a new patron to join the Dive Down Nation. It's Charles. What up, Charles? Thank you for your support. We also have support from an increased tier, Chuck M. Is this the same person?
So I looked at the receipts here, and I was like, I don't think this is the same person. Because... I think they have different email addresses, but I was very confused.
There are more than one person named Charles in this world.
Yeah, but not on our Patreon. I mean, there probably is.
Quick straw poll. How many email addresses do you have, Shane? Do you just have the one?
Oh, I forgot that Google is like closing down email addresses that haven't been used, and that's like the one I use for like Craigslist. And so like I've got to go do something on that one. I've got like 2 email addresses plus work.
Yeah, I've got 2 plus work.
I have 3 plus work.
Secret emails.
I just don't know how to cancel Hotmail. I've had Hotmail since like 1999, and it will not leave me alone. They keep trying to charge me money for it, and I'm like, nope.
Oh no!
But it's still there. It persists. Hotmail persists. I'm an email 1.0 fundamentalist. So Hotmail.
My first email address was with Lycos.
Lycos is pretty good.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Remember that bad boy, that dog?
I do.
We also have some new...
Charles and Chuck. Appreciate it.
We also have some new reviews this week. A few of them, actually. I don't think you guys mentioned any reviews last week, but these are some date as far back as May 26th. Shout out to Chris Abides, who thinks we're cool and good, which I think is true. Dark Shiva, who just thinks we're good and so funny, which also I think is technically the truth, and El Gordo 666, who thinks we are goofballs with uplifting attitudes. I don't see the lie. I don't see a lie in any of those reviews.
Me either. The goofballs one is particularly apt, I guess. We're like your nice goofballs. We don't push it too far. We're not improv people.
We're all goofballs on the dive down, the listeners too. If you'd like to support our show, you can find our Patreon over at patreon.com/thedivedown. You can also support us while playing Magic Online with a Mana Trader subscription. Use promo code TheDiveDown2023 to get 10% off your first 2 months of a Mana Trader subscription. You can also support us with our Barrister and Man promo code, TheDiveDownM23. You know, that code was made in May. It's now June. We have to think of something else for the M to stand for. Like, what's another mnemonic that people can remember M for?
Magic.
Beautiful.
M23. That's the set, right?
That's the set. The Dive Down M23 is the promo code of Barrister and Man. 15% off your first order with them. And finally, this one doesn't even support us. This only supports you. It's the NRG promo code. Dive8 gets you 8% off any order of Magic cards, paper Magic cards from Nerd Rage Gaming. Get into it.
Is that their official motto? Nerd Rage Gaming. Get into it.
It's in the
It's
game.
in the game. What?
We've got what SEG don't.
What SEG has is people crossing their name off on name badges at the RC and Twitter. Did you guys see that? I'm not going to name any names, but that was something to see.
Twitter drama.
Yeah, always.
Magic players love crossing stuff off in protest. We've seen that
satisfying.
happen with art. We've seen it now happen with sponsors. What's next? When does the Sharpie run out of ink?
They're going to start crossing us off on their buttons. That town's gone too far.
When does this Sharpie run out of ink is so... Oh, my God.
These goofballs are making me thirsty.
We spend too much time on the internet. Okay.
Okay, so hold on. So what are we doing here? We're going to first... Are we gonna pretend that we're going to stitch together some kind of time thing, because we know right now we're going to talk about Lord of the Ring cards with the three of us. Mm-hmm. At some point, the episode will morph into just David and myself talking about the breakdown of Dreamhack Dallas.
Yes,
the RC. So we could pretend that Stan's going to step away for half an hour. We do a breakdown. And then we come back for the Lord of the Rings spoilers, or we can just have people understand that we're all together right now. We're going to do Lord of the Rings spoilers, and then we'll come back at some point and do the breakdown.
I prefer reality, so I'm going to say number 2.
Yeah, okay. I prefer reality. Yeah, that's what I always think about Dave. Is he prefers reality. He's a very realistic man.
That's fine by me. I'm just happy to be here.
But we're not going to tell you, so let's go to the break and see what comes next.
The battle for Middle-earth. The final war against Sauron's forces. Grond will break down the door, bring out the wolf's head. Grond, 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 Grond.
This set is not called Battle for Middle-earth, Stan. Why have you said that twice?
What is it called?
It's not called that.
Is it Tales?
It's called Tales of Middle-earth.
Oh,
it's
you know what?
Tales
Battle
of
for Middle-earth is like the PS2 game, I think.
Battle for Middle-earth is the less successful second set in the long tradition of Magic sets that have the word battle in the title, such as Battle for Zendikar.
There was something called Battle for Middle-earth. Yeah,
It's just your
2004, Microsoft Windows, EA Games.
When you were 14 years old,
Get in the game, Frodo.
you were playing this. You put a lot of hours into Battle for Middle-earth.
Dude, it was directed by Bing Gordon. Of course I played a lot of hours. I love a Bing Gordon joint.
Joint, yeah. I do. You're talking about a lot of Bing Gordon's resume all the time. Underappreciated.
He was not involved in this set, unfortunately, but we're going to talk about the cards anyway.
We're here. They finally did it.
It comes out just in a few weeks. It's finally happening. Straight to Modern and other Eternal formats, so it's not touching Pioneer or Standard.
Yeah.
In general, when we see that, that's a Modern Horizons set. But this is different because reasons.
Because supposedly this started as a commander set that they then swerved into modern at the last minute. Supposedly.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's a couple things, right? Like one, you can it sets boundaries on design. It gives people, and it gives, I think, more ideas for design as well, right? Like if you're doing like a full 300 whatever card set, then you can just be like, okay, well, this is, 80% of them are cool for Commander, and then 20% are cool for our non-rotating formats or eternal formats. So go for it. I mean, I think it gives people the opportunity to stretch their design muscles, and then gives other people the reason to buy the cards, right? So
Yeah.
win-win.
It gives them a reason to make money off of this, which, we're here for that. We're part of that system. It is what it is.
Have we ever stopped WotC from making money? Really? We've had buying guides on why you might want to purchase one of the sets.
Right. And we'll talk about that later. But for now, why don't we talk about what we care about within cards? Just remind people real quick what we're looking for when we look for cards. What do we like? What kind of
Cheap
cards do we
cards.
like? That's the big thing.
Cheap cards.
Cheap cards and free cards.
Yeah.
What else?
Yeah. Well, I almost feel like Modern Horizons has changed the way we evaluate cards. We've talked about this at least once before, but our criteria for what might be good in this type of supplement set, I think, stands apart from the criteria that might be good in a standard set.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the first thing that we like to look for that we've seen in these previous Horizons products is cards that cast spells for free. Just doing an effect for no mana. Or getting extra effects for no mana if you have to pay some mana up front. If you pay the mana, but you get more mana's worth of power and toughness and abilities and other effects, right?
Eloquently put. I
tried.
Yeah, you did great. And then generally, we also like cheap permanents that make extra stuff, right?
Yeah.
Things that make extra material. We talked about this last week. Actually, we were talking about Boros Convoke with Devin. Stuff like a Thraben Inspector. 1 mana makes 2 things. Like that kind of thing is meaningful. Yeah. Even in modern.
Yeah, or just like a cheap permanent that like has extra stat lines or abilities or evasion. So like Dragon's Rage Channeler is at best a 1 mana 3/3 flyer. I think 1 mana 3/3 flyer is probably good.
Seems like still good rate, even in today's modern. It's borderline. It's borderline, but it's close.
So Bone Picker. That's your card, right?
Nailed it. Yeah, I love a Bone Picker. See, Shane can always find the counter example. We also like a 2-for-1, which is what Shane just did to Stan and I by getting both of us with 1 card.
That's good.
That card was Bone Picker.
I wanted Bone Picker to be good. I have a playset of Bone Pickers.
Yeah.
Is that the bird? The cheap bird when something dies?
Exactly.
It's like
it's a 1 mana 3/2 flyer. Yeah.
Yeah, 2-for-1s are good. Or redundant effects are also good. So if we see a new card that does something else that other cards do that now gives us additional copies of the same, preferably powerful effect, that's something to keep an eye on.
PPE, as we call them.
PPE.
Preferably powerful effect.
Oh, interesting.
Problematic permanent.
And then, finally, we're looking for big, powerful threats. Is the world's next Primeval Titan in this deck? The world's next cheat target, the world's next Archon of Cruelty in this deck, something like that,
Yeah, we call these the big kahuna burgers of Magic.
I didn't know we did that.
Better than nothing burgers. All right, where do we want to start? Now we're going to get into cards, right? Pick who's got a card. I got a card we can start with. I feel like we could warm up. I got a warm up card.
Oh, you going to warm us up with like one of the hottest, most conversational cards we have?
I do, because I think the title fits perfectly with Shane's tone, what Shane's tone will be across the rest of this recording session. Shane's tone.
No, Shane's
and
nice.
The card.
Shane's rebranded.
Shane's rebranded. Mm-hmm. Well, he's really reflected since he broke his wrist. Stern Scolding.
Hold on. Before we get into Stern Scolding, can I get into how you just dragged me in the intro? Shane can't podcast because he broke his wrist. No. So like, not only did I break my wrist, which was like annoying and in the way, but I had previous plans to babysit my tiny niece.
I know.
And that's what I was doing. I was seeing my young niece person, and she cried because she's an infant. But it was very nice, and that's what I was doing instead of recording a podcast. But it was also nice to have a week off.
Yeah, you can't record. Well, famously can't record while holding an infant, as we all know. They do not respect when the red light is on in the booth.
Have you ever tried that, David? I feel like you never even tried to do this.
I never even tried. No.
Well, we also started. I mean, how old were your kids when we started?
An infant. One was an infant, and one was 3-ish.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, that's peak child holding time. Yeah. Anyway, Stern Scolding.
They're louder now. Okay, Shane's card of the set, Stern Scolding. Here's what it is.
This is worth talking about.
Yeah, it's a single blue for an instant. Counter target creature spell with power or toughness 2 or less. Who loves a single mana conditional counter? You know, I love a single mana conditional counter.
Me too.
They almost always are not as good as Spell Pierce, and I think that's kind of something to think about here, although this one only targets creatures. But the only thing I want to give us as a baseline for conversation, Seth, Saffron Olive from Goldfish, calculated how many things it hits in Modern. Put a tweet out. This is what he said. It hits 5 of the 10 most played creatures, 10 of the 20 most played creatures, 29 of the 50 most played creatures. With that in mind, Stan, what do you think of this card?
I don't remember this happening in the books or the movies, but
you don't remember getting yelled at?
I don't remember.
Gandalf?
I don't remember anyone Stern Scolding, but so I think
Fool of a Took. I think that quote is actually directly from the book. I think it is.
I'm sure it is. Okay, so I don't think we've ever seen a creature counter spell see play. There are cards that say counter target creature spell. They never make the cut. I think
Essence Scatter.
Yeah, Essence Scatter is a 2-mana card that can counter any creature.
Exactly. Right. And maybe it's these occasional like standard play or something, but like not. I've never put it in a deck. I think the only reason we're talking about this one is because it's 1 mana, and I think Saffron Olive said like math here, table napkin math is probably like the reason we are considering it, just because like it's going to hit a lot of like the creatures that people try to cheat into play in Scam, or it's going to hit Ragavans, or it's just going to like hit a bunch of random stuff. And I think it like hits at least one thing in almost every deck that runs creatures, basically.
Yeah, I mean, look, it hits lots of stuff in Hammer.
Yeah, that's the thing.
It hits Ragavan. It hits DRC. It hits Grief. It hits Solitude, Rude Dude. Does not hit Fury. Does not hit the other ones.
Endurance.
But it does hit those 2 that are really annoying. I mean, it is interesting. In a world where creatures are often spells, it does feel a little more useful, but I'm not going to like put up for this card because I do feel like we're kind of in minor misstep territory here, more so than we are new format stable, personally.
Yeah, I mean, we know what we're going to get with this card, I feel like. I think we know what we're going to get with the card, and also the arguments that people will have about this card, right?
Yeah.
Which is just like, like if creature decks, if there's like a lot of decks with a good amount of creatures where it makes sense to sideboard this card, then sure, then we might see like 1 or 2 copies in sideboards of controlling decks when the meta game is particularly appetizing to play it.
I just thought of a nice pithy line that I've never thought of before while thinking about this card. And minor misstep, the comparison there, because we've seen minor misstep see like some play, especially in sideboards. Just because a card like this may see occasional play doesn't mean that it's actually that good. Maybe it's just serviceable, and we'll take it in and out from time to time. Maybe we'll try it out at first and then give up on it later, and that's fine. It'll serve its role, we'll learn from it, and then we can move on or keep playing 1 or 2 of them. And that's magic, baby.
That's magic, and that's the dive down. Wow, we actually all agree on this one, I think. It feels like we're all kind of like, looks interesting because it's 1 mana, but probably meh.
The real question, though, is this actually better than minor misstep, though? And I think it is.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
And I think this is better than minor misstep.
I do, too. Yeah.
Because I think because it hits more. I think it has a wider net to cast in terms of control decks casting nets, like as they do. But I think it's totally fine. Like I think you're right, Stan, where it's like I don't think it's like a blow your mind card, but this could be better than I think. But I really think it depends on kind of assessing what people are actually doing in the metagame and going from there.
Yeah, I kind of just think the coolest thing about this is that it deals with grief, and it basically deals with everything except fury out of Scam. And I think that's really cool. That it's like a 1 mana interaction that like doesn't like shut that deck down, but gives you really good interaction without necessarily taking a huge mana disadvantage, where countering something out of the grief deck with like a blue counterspell feels like you're losing something in that exchange.
All right, someone else pick the next card. Let's see. Who wants to talk about what?
Well, Dave, you did, so in full behind the curtain stuff, Dave did the first pass through on all these cards, and I was like, some of these I agree with, some of these I don't. I'm going to pick one card that I was surprised y'all didn't pick, and it's going to require me to go down the list, and it is Cast Into the Fire, which I think is actually quite possibly the second most likely card behind Stern Scolding to actually see play. And that's 1 in a red, instant, choose 1, Cast Into the Fire deals 1 damage to each of up to 2 target creatures. So does Fork Bolt only hit target creatures, or is it any target?
Any target.
Yeah, any target.
Okay, so a Fork Bolt style thing for creatures. And then the other mode is exile target artifact for 1 in a red.
It's like a braid, but
yeah, I
even
think it's
maybe better.
Yeah, I think it's a potentially better braid. I think this is very playable. I think it's super viable against Hammer. Like, Hammer needs more hate, apparently, from the set after the first card. Exiling is a really nice ability. I think this is just clean, efficient, useful.
I think you're totally right. I just don't think there's a lot to say about this card.
No,
I was
exactly.
like, when you added this to the list, I was like, oh yeah.
Yeah, it's a card.
Fork Bolt can be good. I mean, one of the problems with Fork Bolt is that it's a sorcery. And so it doesn't get to see play that much. But since this is an instant, I think in the fact that you can occasionally fully get a 2-for-1 for it, I kind of like this.
How many creatures are we tagging, though? Like, I feel like the difference between this and Fork Bolt is that Fork Bolt can deal 2 to something for 1 mana. Or if you're only hitting like a 1-drop, you can always take the other side to the face. This feels like the exile target artifact is the best mode. And you're bringing this as artifact hate more often than not. And if it has like additional usefulness, fine. But yeah, I was actually surprised that you were as high on this, because this seems like one of the modes is very conditional to me.
Yeah, I think it's fine. I think it's good. I think it will see play. I mean, I'm not going to say like, I think you are getting at is I think the application is somewhat narrow in the end, right? Like, you really have to have an artifact that you want to exile, or hopefully a metagame where you have a bunch of X ones. But even in something like Hammer Time, there's not that many X ones.
Exactly.
Just Esper Sentinel, in fact, just to remind people, and also Inkmoth Nexus, of course. They don't play Memnite. Hammer doesn't play Memnite really anymore.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's not astounding, but it's good.
Yeah, I think it's fine. I think one thing is funny is, like, I also agree that this is one of the most likely cards to see some play, and it kind of tells you a little bit about how I feel about the overall power level of the set so far, that we're kind of like, oh, here's this like conditional removal spell that I think is going to see a reasonable amount of play, and that is the second card that we want to talk about.
Well, I also just went straight to the boring stuff. You know me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The meat and potatoes.
Stanislav.
All right, guys.
Well, something that gets that boring card out of the way quickly.
Yeah.
So let's go to some fun and conversational stuff.
Yeah, let's talk about Press the Enemy. This is the card that like I was walking down the street.
My favorite Rage Against the Machine song.
Pushing my child stroller, talking to myself, and like increasingly convincing myself why this card is interesting and exciting.
Oh boy. Okay.
Ooh,
I can't wait to hear this then. Stan, read the card.
This is like my favorite Stanislav takes, where it's like slightly too expensive card that does interesting things, and Shane's like, cost too much.
I don't know. This does a lot of interesting things. For 2 blue at instant speed, return target spell or non-land permanent an opponent controls to its owner's hand. You may cast an instant or sorcery spell with equal or lesser mana value from your hand without paying its mana cost. That second line of text, there's a couple things to unpack there. Equal or lesser value. So I think that's counting the target of your first mode. So if you're bouncing something that costs 0 mana, you can only spend 0 mana for the free effect, etc. I mean, this is a really cool cascade spell, I think.
All right, so tell me
Rhino's
why.
Living End, the other one, I can't.
Which has to be in your hand.
Restore
the
balance.
Cascade spell.
Yeah.
Yeah. You think this is a reasonable piece of interaction in rhinos specifically? Let's just start with rhinos specifically.
Sure. Yeah, we can talk about Rhino specifically.
So you think this is a reasonable piece of interaction for you to have. What do you think you would play it over?
Either Mystical Dispute or Brazen Borrower. or both. If you're not playing both, it's like whichever one of those is in your main deck now.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so tough.
Here's
mana.
why. So
it's 4 mana. It doesn't have any cheap modes.
So what if it's 4 mana?
I'd rather just suspend. I'd rather just suspend it.
Well, okay, all right. So let's talk about that. Suspending is good if you have the card in your opening hand.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
Sometimes you're drawing the suspend card late, and then you're like struggling. Like, do I spend the mana now and then forecast what I'm trying to do, or do I like use Fable the Mirror Breaker or something else to like try to get value out of this card in my hand and trade it for something else? Maybe if you have endurance, you can pitch it to something. What I like about this is that it both interacts and puts down like your combo card, whether it's Rhinos or Living End or whatever else.
Yeah.
Okay, what about when you don't have Crashing Footfalls in your hand, though? Like, so, I mean, your best case scenario, what is I'm interacting with the board with my 4 mana instant and then maybe casting a Dead Gone off it, or like Fire Ice or something like that off it, which is like, not the end of the world, but then that would require maybe 2 pieces of cardboard you wanted to interact with on the other side of the board with like a Dead Gone, or you're like, well, I guess I'm going to burn you for 2 right now with fire or something like that, which is like, yeah, that is a use of mana, but I'm not sure like bounce plus shock is worth my 4 mana. Like, I feel like it's only very good when you do have the Crashing Footfalls, and I'm not sure I want to rely on that to like be the ceiling of my 4 mana card personally.
Sure, but I also think that if you don't have the Footfalls, then this is really good force fodder as well. Like, you can find other uses for this card if you're not doing the thing. And, part of what really appealed to me here is that it gives you play against Teferi on your turn too. So for instance, if it's your main deck or main phase and you want to bounce an opposing Teferi and Cascade, you frequently need a lot of mana. Like, you need the 2 for the Brazen Borrower plus 3 for the Cascade spell. This you can do both with 4. If it's on your turn, the spell resolves in the order that it's listed, so you can bounce an opponent's Teferi and get Rhinos on the board immediately, or a Living End.
Here's my thing. I mean, like, I agree with this. I agree with this take, but like, I think the reason that this deck works more often, right, is like there are usually 8 Cascade cards where all you have to do is cast a Cascade card and get your Crashing Footfalls. There's only 4 Crashing Footfalls in your deck. Mm-hmm. And hopefully you've burned through more of them with an actual Cascade card. And then if you end up with one stuck in your hand and you have the Press the Enemy, like, I feel like the situations in which that actually happens are not super frequent, and then sort of requires things to go right more often than I want, which is like why this deck works so well for me, is kind of just like things don't have to line up particularly well besides I cast a Cascade card. Do you know what I mean? And that's kind of like, I think the secret power of this deck is just like it's, weird, boring consistency. You do the same thing every game. You cast a Cascade spell on 3. And like, yeah, I agree with you where it's like, this is a nice get out of jail type thing when like the situation is lining up pretty poorly, and maybe that's enough, right? But like,
yeah,
like, I think
that's the question, right? Like, is that enough? Because I think one struggle with the deck has always been like, how do we make the most out of the situations where you're like, you draw the card that you don't want to ever draw, and this gives you that plan B that isn't awkward, because cascading a spell is awkward. But now we're only talking about Rhinos. Like, maybe this is the type of thing that can open the door for a Cascade deck that has more payoffs than just like the one suspend card. Like a true value Cascade deck with this and Ancestral Visions or something.
Yeah. That's where I think this actually more interesting to me, is in a very different shell, right? Where it's just like, it's a controlling deck that could take advantage of, like Dave was getting at, sort of like the busted suspend stuff, like, Restore Balance, or even going back to Ancestral Visions or something like that. Or that's Visions, right? Visions is a suspend, Recall is the broken boon.
Correct.
Okay, we got there.
But also, Please don't make me think that Ancestral Vision is going to be playable again.
I mean, it probably won't be.
I don't know. Maybe. It's just it feels like such a different world to me to try to leverage those particular cards, but I could be wrong, you know?
Yeah.
I do think this card is super interesting, but yeah, it's complicated to know where it goes. And maybe you're right, Stan, that the best way to use something like this is to go all in on things that are lots more payoffs. And then you're kind of like, well, am I playing this with Electro Dominance too? And does this become the kind of 8-pack that goes into that set? So it's no longer a cascade into it. It's Electro Dominance and press the enemy, because you're going to be able to do some kind of pressing at some point. Like everybody plays permanents or spells, right? Am I wrong?
You're not wrong, David.
I can't think of a single deck where I can't bounce anything at some point. It's just about getting to 4 mana.
Cool. Good talk.
All right. I want to go on to another card here.
Let's go to the next one, Dave. This next one's good.
This is a card that I like. Not the next one.
Oh.
I'm going to go to the one before it, and that is Forge Anew.
Oh, yeah.
Forge Anew, which is 2 generic and a white for an enchantment. It says when Forge Anew enters the battlefield, return target equipment card from your graveyard to the battlefield. As long as it's your turn, you may activate equip abilities anytime you could cast an instant. You may pay 0 rather than pay the equip cost of the first equip ability you activate during each of your turns.
Yeah.
I just think this card might sneak in there as like Hammer Equipper number 9/10 in Hammer. To be clear, I don't think it replaces, or like, I don't think it's going to be a 4-pack in those decks. But having this weird combination of Sigarda's Aid / Pure Steel Paladin plus Steel Shaper's Gift plus potentially bring back something like, I mean, I guess it's impossible to get Cauldron Complete in the graveyard, basically, but like maybe you can bring back a different piece of it, one of your living weapons, if you're running Nettle Cyst or something as well, and bring that directly back to the battlefield. It seems like it's got a lot of potential to do a lot of different stuff. But
which you're paying for.
Yeah, I mean, I 3 mana. I mean, clearly, 3 mana would be the most expensive card in that deck. I was just looking at deck lists last night to think about this a little bit. There are no 3 mana cards in Hammer right now at all, except weirdly, I did see a couple of Hammer decks that were trying out Cosmic Rebirth. Are you familiar with Cosmic Rebirth?
Isn't that the Bant-ish?
It is green, white, and a generic. And it targets a permanent in your graveyard, and if you target a permanent that is less than 3 CMC, it puts it onto the battlefield, and you gain 3 life. And it's an instant, which makes it a little different than this. But also, it feels like if people are trying that kind of stuff, maybe you could try this, and this still gets you a resilient equip at least once a turn. Because, part of the problem with that deck, as you are well aware, Shane, is always, do I have enough cards that do equipping or not?
Yes. I mean, it's funny that this is like the equipment stuff in this set is like, this is, well, I want my cast into the fire so that you cannot use your Forge Anew.
Yeah.
So no, I mean, I'm on board with this card. Like, I think it does a lot for a lot of mana, but it's stuff that you really want to be doing. So maybe against certain types of decks, like whether it's like you said, maybe it's like card 9 and 10, or maybe it's, I know my equipment card is going to be destroyed like during this. Like, people are going to come in with like anti-equipment cards, and then I can be like, well, okay, I need my recursion. I know it's going to be a grindy game, so like I'm just going to want to be able to equip this stuff really quickly. I don't want to have an instant equipper type thing. So this sort of does everything in a single package rather than have to like piece together the puzzle. That can be a challenge in post-sideboard games.
Yeah, and it avoids the awkwardness of like, with Sigarda's Aid, you only get the free equip when it comes into play, right? For example, and then with Pure Steel Paladin, you only get it if the Pure Steel Paladin survives. So this is, even though this is expensive, it sort of splits that middle where, there's nothing more frustrating than having like a Sigarda's Aid in play and one in your hand and having Hammer on the board already because they already killed your carrier one time. And you're like, okay, well, I can't do anything right now, but this at least gives you a little bit of a backdoor there when you get to like turn 4 with this deck, or get quote unquote the late game, where you can get one more equip off of something.
The thing that we're not saying, but I think we agree on, is that this card is still good even if you don't have an artifact in the graveyard, right? Just like
Right.
Being able to cheat on equip costs is part of like what makes this exciting too, in and of itself.
Yeah, that's the main part. It's 3 different things. It's a little bit of Stoneforge Mystic / Steel Shaper's Gift. It's a little bit of the equippers, and it's a little bit of the instant ability thing. So you can mess with blockers the same way you can with Sigarda's Aid.
Yeah, I will personally say that I don't think this is main deck play. I think I like the situation I said before. I think it's just kind of like a grindier post sideboard option against certain matchups where it's like I need this all in one 3 mana thing because it just kind of does everything I need at once rather than I don't think it fits into the game 1 speed plan or any of the plans personally.
Yeah. I think I would play this over Core Outfitter in the decks that people are still thinking about that. But that's what Core Outfitter is there for.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it's to get a free equip ability. Yeah, you still have to have a creature in order to make this, and not even many decks are playing it that. I would think if I was playing a list where I still like Steel Shaper's Gift, I would maybe try this over Steel Shaper's Gift. I would, even though they're pretty different things, it's like long game versus short game, but I've never super loved Steel Shaper's Gift either. In Hammer, it's kind of fine, but not amazing. So, and I would definitely try this over like Reality Chip or any of those other things that are supposed to give you long game if you're thinking that way about Hammer still. I would rather just have a card that brings back my good cards rather than something that draws me a bunch of extra cards like Reality Chip. But that's kind of my mindset. But I don't think there's a shot that this is a 4 of in the deck at all. Of course.
Yeah. So my one question though is that are you beating Hammer because you're casting like a Braid or Force of Vigor, or are you beating Hammer because you keep them from having creatures on the board? And I feel like a lot of the games where I'm beating Hammer, it's because of like Fury and Fire and Dead Gone and Unholy Heat and Lightning Bolt effects, more so than just like disenchants.
Yeah, it depends on what tools your deck has. Honestly, I mean, if you have Force of Vigor and you don't have Fury, then you're just talking about Rhinos in that sense, and Rhinos happens to have a lot of cards that are good against Hammer in the sideboard, so, but not everybody has access to that same plan.
We also have Unholy
Murktide
Heat.
doesn't have Force of Vigor.
Yeah, but, I threw in some Murktide cards in that example, so I wasn't just a one-trick pony.
Yeah, I understand.
One-trick horn dog.
But yeah, I think that this helps with some of the problems that Hammer can have, but not in a huge way. Mm-hmm. Okay, what's next on everybody's mind?
All right. Let's talk about Orcish Bowmasters.
Yes.
Okay.
1 in the black. Orc Archer, my favorite tribal deck. This has Flash. It's a 1/1. Shane, that sounds bad. Oh, when it ETBs, and whenever an opponent draws a card, except the first one they draw in each of their draw steps, Orcish Bowmasters deals 1 damage to any target, then amass Orcs 1.
Amass Orcs 1 is the weirdest.
Amass Orcs 1.
Amass Orcs 1 is my favorite Audiker album, actually.
And in between Amber and Try Repeat.
And then they came back like 10 years later for Amass Orcs 2. You didn't see it coming. You didn't know, but
they got really weird in between Amass Orcs 1 and Amass Orcs 2. But they had like that one throwback, or it's like more melodic. So anyway, this card has legs, bows, in Commander, in Legacy, potentially in Modern. I mean, that's really what we're talking about here. So, like, I think this seems like definitely a Commander thing, right? But
no.
And then definitely a Legacy thing because people are already talking about this as being like the death of Delver.
This is like anti-brainstorm.
Sure.
Yet another piece of card that everybody's like, well, this is just anti-brainstorm. Anti-brainstorm.
But I'm down for like a ridiculous build around in Modern any day. And I think this is a pretty cool one. I think there's a couple ways you could do this. I think one, it just sort of has general utility against a lot of little stuff.
Yeah.
Like, you're again, more anti-hammer stuff. Like, I think this is really annoying with like, Esper Sentinel, Pure Steel Paladin type shenanigans. I think it's really annoying for like Fable of the Mirror Breaker decks and like Seasoned Pyromancer decks. Or, you want to get really reachy, like Horizon Land decks, like Burn or like Yawgmoth. Like, I don't think that's particularly great. Omnath decks, I think it has some kind of utility. Teferi 3. I mean, there's just a lot of little card draw stuff that I think this sort of makes beneficial for you. But like, let's live the dream.
This thing does 3 damage in response to the second chapter of Fable the Mirror Breaker.
Yeah, I mean, it's
you flash it in when somebody does second damage, does that, and you get amass. Not only that, it does 3 damage, and then you amass orcs 3 times.
I mean, that's very cool.
So you get a 3/3 too.
I mean, the amass is the thing here. The pinging is like, okay, cool. The amassing is the thing where it's like, oh, this is a lot, for a little. Like I'm getting 2 pieces of cardboard. It could be, I mean, it's like almost like a flash blade spicer thing that also can ping off opponents' creatures or go to the dome. Like, let's just live the dream. Like I read this on Reddit, right? A Ragavan and then DRC on turn 2 into Consider. And then you respond with this.
Yep.
And it's just like, oh, I mean, that you are living the dream, but that's also a reasonable plan of attack for your Murktide opponent. So there's just a lot of stuff you can do with this. I mean, and then what I really get into in my brain is like, let's play Sign in Blood.
No.
And let's play Burning Inquiry.
What are you talking about?
I'm talking about card draw burn. I'm talking about Bump in the Night, my friend.
That's too funny to me. I mean, the Burning Inquiry run, I mind a lot less than Sign in Blood. Burning Inquiry is a card on the bubble of Modern that needs a home ever since Hollow One has died. Like, it's a 1-mana, very powerful card. So, like, okay, someday maybe.
Dave, how much do you love Sign in Blood, though? It carried you in that Modern Masters 15 sealed.
I have to show you guys something. I have pictures up in front of me.
Sign in Blood.
Yeah, I got these signed for you.
You did. Framed Sign in Blood right here. It's right in front of my computer monitor now as I continue to set up my office down here.
Howard Lyon's signature is so good.
Yeah. Anyway, we're not playing Sign in Blood in Modern. We're not playing Sign in Blood in Modern, but I do think this card is just good. Like, I don't know what shell it makes the most sense in. I don't know exactly where it goes, but I do think this is a card that I'm excited to play. When I first read it, I was like, okay, Orcish Bowmasters, you do a lot of stuff for not a lot of mana, and you have flash.
So
I don't know what it goes into. I think it's just cool card. I just like it.
Do you think the Amass Orcs one is better enough than what Fairy Mastermind is doing?
Yes. I think it's the fact that it can kill a X1 is huge, and you don't need a trigger to kill an X1 is actually really helpful, too.
But you do need the trigger. You need them to draw an extra card.
No, you don't. It says when it enters the battlefield and whenever an opponent draws a card. So you get one free trigger off of this.
This card's dumb.
No, this card is completely unplayable without that when it enters the battlefield.
Good catch.
So it doesn't even have to be in response to their draws. It's just if you do that, get an X1 and then they draw an extra card at some point, then you get another trigger.
Yeah, the real problem with this card is like, can you main deck it? And I'm not sure. Like, unless you're doing like a weird build around thing where you're forcing card draw, and that's not really going to win you a lot of games if you're like relying on Orcish Bowmasters to be on the battlefield. So like, I think, is it like a sideboard card? I don't really know exactly where this fits in personally, but like, it does, like you're getting at, it's just every time you read it, we're like, oh yeah, this just does a lot of cool stuff. But doing a lot of cool stuff doesn't necessarily mean that you're seeing Modern play. But
I just see this in like Blue-Black Shadow or something, like where it's this kind of like weird tempo-y deck where I have this card that can be a 2-for-1 that's really fit for the meta and is a reasonable threat on its own. Like it's almost like you don't control it. I was going to say it's almost like a black young pyromancer, you know what I mean? But at the same time, it's not that useful either. So I don't know. I like this card. I feel like this card has a good chance to have a real home.
Yeah, it's great. Very cool design. Just rad.
All right, what's next on everybody's mind?
Let's talk about some of the lands. Legendary land cycle. They're all like
these.
kind of interesting.
I think you're all bonkers.
They said that there was no land cycle to go with Mount Doom. Remember when we saw the Mount Doom promo? They're like, this isn't part of a cycle. That's fine, but there still is a legendary land rare cycle, and I think these are reasonable cards. Kind of all of them, I think, are interesting in different ways, although they do have the problem of coming into play tapped unless you control a legendary creature. So they're very hard to use, and they're hard to use in a lot of multiples, I think, as well.
Yeah.
But can I talk about my favorite one first?
Yeah, let's talk about our favorite ones.
Okay, I'm going to talk about my favorite one first. It's Minas Tirith. It's a legendary land. It's tapped to add white, enters the battlefield tapped unless you control a legendary creature. It has the activated ability of a generic and a white. Tap it to draw a card. Activate only if you attacked with 2 or more creatures this turn. It seems like a reasonable card draw engine, especially as we've seen these decks get kind of popular with, the Hank the OB style decks that we've talked about here and there that are just basically white weenie decks, mono white human decks in Modern.
Before we talk about the upside about all these cards, can we just talk about the fact that you have to control a legendary creature for any of these lands that come into play untapped?
Yep.
That's a big deal.
It is a big deal.
But okay, so with this one, we have Skrelv, we have Kithian.
Yep. As 1-drops. And then we have Thalia.
Thalia, yes, please.
Thalia.
Stoneforge is not. She's just a mystic.
That's not in that deck, though.
I know. I'm just thinking about white 2-drops.
I mean, I think this is really like for a couple things. One is, as it's a common theme for this episode, this is like a one of. This is like a spicy one of in your mana base. You're not playing 4 of these. You don't want. I think that these are kind of in the same space and worse than the channel lands by a good amount, although I think the effects on these are much more powerful than the channel lands, generally speaking. But yeah, I think this is like a spicy 1 of, or maybe at most a 2 of in that white deck, because that white deck can run out of gas. And being able to turn a couple of your mopey creatures, like if you have a bodyguard and you have Luminarch Aspirant and you're like, do I have any good attacks right now? Being able to attack in and then draw a card is something into a kind of unfavorable attack or something that trades material for cards can be a good thing. And with the activated cost being pretty low on this land, I feel like that's part of the reason that I like it in that shell. But, you're not trying to get this down on turn 1 or turn 2 that much, I don't think. I think you're really hopeful that this is like something you draw during the course of the game, not during your first couple turns.
I mean, that gets to my issue with this card. Here's the thing, though. I also said something similar to this about now banned, blue land that his name is escaping me. That
Mystic Sanctuary.
Mystic Sanctuary, yes, thank you. So that's what I think people's initial complaint was. Even people who played blue-white control, like I think I remember Harry from Midweek Metagame. I think I remember him being pretty low on that because of the potential downsides. Don't quote me on that, Harry. But I think I remember you saying that. But then ultimately, of course, everyone came around to it, realized that this card is absurd and you play it because it just is doing absurd things. And the potential downside is not that bad. So I'm looking at this and I'm like, well, what happens when you do run like your maybe a 22 land creature deck and you have this in your opener, or like one of your 2 lands in your opener is this, and you're like, well, I don't have Skrelv or something like that. And it's like, it is coming into play tap. And I'm like, well, that can lose you a game. Like just literally can straight up lose you a game.
Yeah. It can also not matter.
It can also not matter.
And if you open a hand that doesn't have one of your legends in that scenario, your legends are the 1-drops that you have in your deck mostly, right? So then you just play this on turn 1 and say pass and go, okay.
Well, I can't hold up Mana Tithe that way, Dave.
Yeah, exactly. But you can hold up Solitude and the Shining Shoal with that. So,
Yeah, that's all well and good.
But I do think this is the best one of these personally. I think it's like reasonable to get to activate because attacking with 2 creatures isn't that bad in the deck that I think this fits in. And that's kind of it for me, though. But I like this card a lot.
I had a different opinion on which was the best of these. And the one that jumped out to me the most was Barad-dûr. Barad-dûr. That's the black one. That's got XXB, tap, amass Orcs X. Activate only if a creature died this turn.
Amass Orcs X.
Which that was interesting to me because like the only other land, there's only a couple other lands I can think of that produce bodies. One is Castle Arndale. Arden.
Yep.
The Arndale is a mall
yep.
in Manchester, so I know it's not Castle Arndale, but is it Arvindale or something?
I heard that the card is named the card in Eldraine is named after that mall in Manchester.
Oh, okay, yeah. All right,
so don't you know?
So Castle Arndale Mall is one. Colony Garden is the other. There? No,
not in Manchester.
I think we have a PF Chang's somewhere in Manchester, but not at the mall. It does have Manchester's only Taco Bell that I'm aware of.
Really?
Yeah. An abridged menu though makes me sad, but still good enough. Okay, so we have Castle Arndale. And then we have Colony Garden. This is one in black where you can just keep making bigger bodies. Like with the castle and like the Colony Garden creatures are bodies that you don't use, like you use them to cheat something, right? Or just like to have like dinky blockers. Right. This can actually produce a real threat over time. And it being in black, I think, is actually pretty easy to get the condition off because it counts both sides, right? If you destroy a opponent's creature in a black control deck, or if you have a black creature deck and they destroy one of yours, you can just make another body. And if you have a lot of mana, you can make a pretty big body.
Yeah. The only problem with this for me is that, and I like this card too, and you can make a pretty big body and you can build a big threat over time by amassing more than once. You know, because keep in mind, it doesn't make an extra token when you amass. It adds to the token you have. So just we have to always remember that with amass. The problem is activating if a creature died this turn has been tough in the past to get payoffs off of. And a card that we talked about earlier, Bone Picker, exactly. Like manipulating a situation to turn that into a good thing has never been the easiest thing in the world. I like it better in this case because this is on a land. But that's the only thing that gives me pause about this card. And of course, you know, without it, this card would be completely absurd in one way or another. But
here's a play pattern I like with this, which is you have an amassed orc, you block with it, you make another amassed orc.
Right.
I mean, that's a nice play pattern. Is that a modern nice play pattern? I do not know. But it certainly is kind of a way to continually put up a little force field if your opponent only has kind of a single creature that they're, you know, after your attrition game has wound down and they have a single creature left, like you do have a land that you've been using to, you know, do your game plan that also can provide you a roadblock against many things, not everything. I mean, you know, a rhino is still going to trample over it, but not a ton of creatures have trample, things like that. So I think it's interesting. Yeah. It's not a card that I'm like massively hyped over, but I do see the application here.
Well, we can't all be massively hyped over cards, can we, Shane?
No, it's not my job.
Well, Shane is, you know, he's giving us Stern Scoldings. The last one of these I wanted to talk about really quickly, Shane, really quickly.
Okay.
Is Mines of Moria. Just because I thought this card was interesting is that it's the red one. It enters the battlefield tapped, blah, blah, blah. It has an activated ability that is 3 generic red, tap, exile 3 cards from your graveyard, and create 2 treasure tokens. I just thought this card was interesting. I've seen people mention it as a potential fit for creativity, which I don't get because it's not a mountain. And you really want all your lands to be mountains in creativity for many reasons. But, you know, I think this is a cool one in that the idea that if there's a deck out there that wants to grind and have access to tokens later in the game, having a land that can make tokens multiple times over the course of a game can be handy. I don't know where it lives. If there's like a weird Asmo grindy deck that wants to get tokens for some reason or something like that. Not Asmo necessarily, but, you know, like a food style deck that wants treasure tokens or just a lot of tokens. That could be cool. I think, you know, this thing goes with the thing that makes extra tokens. So if you have that card from Modern Horizons 2, that when you make a token, it also makes a food and a...
like the automaton thing or whatever.
Yeah. So, like, if you wanted to jumpstart a deck that had that in it again with this kind of thing after you get blown out or something, that's possible too. I don't even know. This is another one where, like, I don't know if you care that it comes into play tapped because I don't think this goes in a deck that is aggro at all. So it's like whatever. But I thought that this was interesting. There's a way to make 2 tokens off of a land now.
Cool. I think we got to speed up a little bit because we have a lot of hobbits to talk about.
We've got like 20 minutes. We should pick what we're going to talk about.
Well, should we talk about like legends as a concept? We have so many cards here that care about legends, and we were just talking about these lands that enter tapped unless you have a legend in play, and we saw that as a downside. But can this be a set that makes Legends Matters decks playable in Modern?
Well, that's I think what I've been looking for, and I think sort of we have a bunch of legendary creatures to talk about soon. I think we have a bunch of like hobbits. I think really it comes down to, like are the payoffs good enough and to warrant running the legends that we have? And I think we sort of are seeing in some colors we're going to have fewer than others. I think it really depends on. That's my issue, Stan, is like I don't know if we have enough core density of like awesome legends to like make a modern Legend Matters thing. But do you want to talk about a bunch of interesting legends, or do you have more to say on your line of thinking?
I would love to talk about interesting legends because we can look at payoffs outside of this set too.
Sure.
I think we're looking for a Mox Amber deck, right? And that'll
Possibly.
be part of
Yeah.
that would be part of any like legends package that comes out of Lord of the Rings. So if we want to talk about some legendary hobbitses, why not start?
There's a lot of them. A lot of hobbitses.
Yeah.
Let's start with the best one.
Yes, this is definitely the best one.
It's Frodo.
Frodo, Determined Hero. Yes, Frodo. Frodo, Determined Hero. 1 and a white. Legendary Halfling Warrior 2/2. I'm just going to steal Dave's card. Whenever Frodo Determined Hero ETBs or attacks, you may attach target equipment you control with mana value 2 or 3 to Frodo. And as long as it's your turn, prevent all damage that we would dealt to Frodo.
Yes.
Definitely the most funny templating to avoid the existence of Colossus Hammer.
But it also avoids keep in mind, it also avoids the existence of Batterskull.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like, we also don't want you to get a free Batterskull equip.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's like for modern, it feels almost like, attached target equipment, not named Colossus Hammer, but it's an interesting one, right? It's like, I think getting the free equip of basically a sword, more or less. It's like sword.deck.
I will say another card that came to my mind with this though is Nettle Cyst again, which is
3,
a card
right?
that's, and here's the thing. In
It's a 2.
Stoneforge, it's a 3. In Stoneforge decks that do not have hammer, those tend to be affinity-esque builds that focus on Nettle Cyst style effects, which I think is an interesting place that Frodo could go. If there's a new way to play Stoneforge Hammer that is not just as an enabler for Colossus Hammer. That's kind of what this feels like to me. But it's a powerful threat in that deck as long as it's your turn, prevent all damage that would be dealt to Frodo. So I get to attack with a 6/6 or a 7/7 that got a free equip and can't be killed by damage on my turn.
Yeah. It's also great because it helps reduce the risk of you getting 2-for-1 when you try to equip something to it too. You know what I mean? Like, it still dives to Fatal Push, but not everyone's running Fatal Push in Modern.
This is where I start seeing like a new style of deck, or a potentially revitalized old style of deck, like an Orzhov Stoneblade type thing, where we have all sorts of ways to make your suited up creatures not get hit, whether it's like Giver of Runes or Skrelv or Frodo Determined Hero, and you're running your Stoneforge for your tutoring. You have cool ways to just be getting damage through. You can run tech swords in the sideboard and the good ones in the main deck. And that could be cool. That could be just like sort of a new way to say, I'm getting enough density of cheap, efficient, equipment matters style stuff, and it's really hard to kill.
Yep. I agree. Let's talk about another Frodo that I think is like marginally good. The uncommon version of Frodo. The one that's green-white for a 1/3 that says whenever Frodo Baggins or another legendary creature enters the battlefield under your control, the ring tempts you. As long as Frodo is your ring bearer, it must be blocked if able. So I've been looking up from the spoilers so far to see what a deck that's just sort of like a turbo ring tempts you deck is, to like get, have the ring bearer, get the powered up effects, all the effects on your ring. I'm pretty sure it starts with Frodo and a bunch of legends, because this is the one that has the most kind of cheap ways to tempt over and over again in a way that feels fast to me anyway.
Yeah, I will note, you notice how we have not said the ring tempts you all episode. So like the cards we have picked out do not have that line of text really.
Yeah, and I wanted us to talk about the ring tempts you again off the top of the episode. I was thinking that we would need to, but then this is the only card I pulled that really felt like it had that text on it. And I think that's because most of the cards that have that text, they make you pay for it. And this one I really don't think does. But this gets back to Stan's question about legendary creatures, a core legendary deck, and what Shane was saying too. Maybe there's a legendary Stoneforge deck with the 2 Frodos and some other stuff going on where you're kind of like, just getting the ring tempts you, and some, ways to take care of the fact that it can't be blocked by creatures with greater power, and like doing weird things like that. And maybe we're even using the black and white Frodo to like end the game occasionally in that deck. But I don't know. So there could be like a mono Frodo tribal deck. It's just all
my
these
Frodo
Frodos.
Matters.
Abzan
Frodo
Frodos
Matters deck.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Just throwing a Siege Rhino.
Abzan Frodos. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm more willing to think that like the first Frodo we talked about, Determined Hero, goes into kind of an existing shell rather than Frodo Baggins making sort of a new turbo ring shell. But I'm willing to see people try it because I think they will.
Yeah. I mean, this is again the only place I saw the ring tempts you that seemed reasonable, but we'll see.
I will. My last point on this is like, I'm excited that we're talking about like swords decks like not 2-3 months after the sword cycle is finally complete, and we were just like, who cares about swords anymore? And it's like, I wonder if R&D was like, let's make people care about swords again.
Yeah, going back to Frodo Determined Hero.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, what are a couple other hobbits that we have here? Turbo Hobbit round. Stan, you want to talk about one of these?
Yeah, so I thought Pippin, Guard of the Citadel is pretty neat. White, blue for legendary halfling soldier. Vigilance, ward 1 for a 2/2. And it has tap. Another target creature you control gains protection from the card type of your choice until end of turn. It can't be blocked, targeted, dealt damage, enchanted, or equipped by anything of that type. Yeah, I thought
Totally agree.
I love the combination of vigilance on a tap ability. Like that's always a powerful, potentially powerful 1-2 punch for cards in general. But the extra protection that it has from ward is nice. Like makes it a little more resilient in the face of removal, run in 6s, furies, what have you. I actually think that creature type is probably the worst thing about it, except the fact that it's legendary. Like halfling soldier, like no one's talking about halflings yet for reasons.
Really wish this was a human, right?
Yeah,
Unfortunately.
or something, right? But you know, it's a powerful bear, and we haven't seen like strong hate bears in a bit, and this has just so much text with like the ability to protect other creatures too. I think this might be pushed enough to actually be useful in a hate bear strategy, or maybe like some legendary matters deck that we're imagining here.
See, I wish this was pushed a little bit more. Like, I think this card is totally decent. I think it's, I mean, I was going to talk about it if you didn't, then I saw you already had it on the list, so I was happy to revisit it in my brain. I think it's just like a little underrated, but I think the ability is really good. So like it just sort of adds to the density of protection effects that we might want in, you know, some kind of low to the ground, you know, equippy, who knows, type deck.
Here's actually the creature type that I think could matter with this, and that's soldiers. I think there's a chance that some of those kind of powerful-esque soldiers payoffs that are floating around in standard right now. You know, we've seen a blue-white soldiers deck in Pioneer pop up occasionally. There might be a way to get some of those payoffs make sense and have Pippin be a part of that in a space that is modern appropriate. There might be. But on the same hand, I don't know, Shane, I don't know how you could think this is underrated for 2 mana. Like, I don't know what else you... Like, do you want it to have ward 2?
Yeah.
For 2 mana? Do you want it to be a 2/3? Like, I mean, like, I don't know.
If it was
what
1
else
and a white,
get.
if it was 1 and a white, you'd be like, sure, it's fine. But like you're paying like the Azorius tax, right? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
so
I guess.
I want it to be a little bit better than it is.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
Yeah.
I think this card is really cool too, and maybe there's a soldier thing instead of a human thing, basically.
Yeah, I mean, blue-white soldiers is a deck in standard right now that's very low to the ground, that has a lot of soldier matters cards, so maybe that's the shell we're actually upgrading and like porting a standard deck into modern.
Yeah, and there's historical old soldiers that are randomly just called that might come in here. Like there's, you know, that one drop, this isn't probably modern playable, but there's that one drop from Theros that pops up occasionally in Pioneer, maybe would pop up in Modern, that's like protection from multicolor 2/1. Like there's weird things that pop up here and there. There's the bodyguard that gets play in the Hank the Obese decks already, and I don't know, maybe. I just think if there's a tribal synergy here, it could be soldier.
Yeah. Adanto Vanguard's a soldier.
Right. We love it.
A Johnny's Pride Mate.
Can we briefly talk about Lobelia, Sackville-Baggins? 2 and a black, legendary halfling with 2/3 with flash. When she ETBs, you exile target creature card from an opponent's graveyard that was put there from the battlefield this turn. Then create X treasure tokens, where X is the exile card's power. I think this is like pretty cool tech against elementals, some other things. I think it's a little pricey. This is probably just worse than like Dauthi Voidwalker, right? I don't know. I think too much has to go right for this to be good.
This card is extremely bad.
Do you think it's very bad?
I think exile target creature card from an opponent's graveyard that was put there from the battlefield this turn for 3 mana is like way too expensive.
I cannot wait to do my Lobelia Matters deck against you.
Yeah. I can't believe that you would tell me that Forge Anew is too expensive for 3 mana and this is fine for 3 mana.
It's not fine.
You know what I mean?
I think it's just, yeah, you're right. If this was 2, it'd be bonkers. Like, give me like a 1/2 Lobelia. I think it'd be pretty cool. Anyway, let's move on.
Yeah, but I don't think we need to talk about any of the other hobbits right now.
I mean, Rosie's part of a combo, right?
Rosie is part of a combo, but we can come back to it later. I just knew that Rosie was going to be in a broken combo. I want it stated for the record. I made a joke about it a year ago when this set was premiered. I was like, Sam's wife is going to be in a broken combo and be the only playable card. And she is.
I need to hear the soundbite.
Yeah, I don't have the receipts handy, but it was here she is. She's part of a weird +1/+1 food token combo shell with like Asmo and oval Daredevil and all that stuff. But
Stanislav, can we pay the troll toll and talk about your troll, the one of Khazad-dûm?
Yeah. All right, sure. 5. Yeah, this. We're going to talk about this card for all of 20 seconds because I think it's just like very obvious in its application. But it's 5 and a black for a 6/5 troll.
That sounds bad, Stan.
I know. Well, wait until you hear its ability. It can't be blocked except by 3 or more creatures.
Okay.
Oh, there's more. It also has swamp cycling 1. Discard this card. Search for a swamp card. Reveal it from your hand. Shuffle. Blah blah blah. Yeah, I put this in for one deck and one deck only. It's called Living End. Mm-hmm. It's a 1 mana cycler that gets you a land, but it also pitches to grief. And then once it hits the board, like, let's say your opponent is able to put down some blockers, like, this is not getting blocked. It's too big. Or if it is getting blocked, it's killing 3 other creatures.
Yeah. I like this because it also fixes your mana. Like a swamp card means a dual land that has swamp type and stuff like that. So I think that's advantageous. It doesn't get you just another card. It only gets you a swamp, which can be good and bad.
I feel like that's kind of the downfall of this card as far as going to Living End is that it only gets you a land. But I don't know. I've literally never tried to play Living End, so I could be completely wrong about that. I will say, real quick, this is the only card with Swamp Cycling 1. Everything else that randomly has Swamp Cycling in Modern is 2. And there are no cards with Island Cycling. So there is not this is the only card that you could play that does this in that deck.
The thing I want to push back on is that I think Swamp Cycling is actually a positive because it's cards like this that ensure you hit 3 mana more frequently.
Yes, which is kind of one of the issues of Living End sometimes is like, man, I really need access to my lands sometimes.
Right. Yeah, you just like draw into cyclers and you kind of feel like you're spinning the wheels, but then you can't actually combo off. And this helps reduce the frequency that something like that happens.
Yeah, see, that's something I wasn't totally aware of in Living End. So if it's like, hey, we could swap this out for one of our other mopey cyclers in some quantity so that, we make sure that we get to 3 lands more often, but still have a density of payoffs for when we do go off, I could totally see that logic working as well. And then, this seems like a slam dunk because of that then.
I forgot about another card that I think is going to see play in Modern, and it's Moira Marauder. Red Goblin Warrior with double strike, 1/1. Shane, that sounds bad. Whenever a goblin or orc you control deals combat damage to a player, exile the top card of your library. You may play that card this turn. This seems good in goblins, or just sort of good, or like an option. Like it draws 2 on an empty board. It's like, it definitely just like a must kill threat for your opponent. I feel like just another must kill threat. And like, it's just a good source of card advantage in goblins. And it hits hard when it's played with like a Lord shell. But it like dies really quickly as a 1/1.
Are you familiar with a card called Warren Instigator?
I know of it.
Okay. It's very similar to the same card, right? Warren Instigator is red for a double strike, 1/1. Whenever Warren Instigator deals damage to an opponent, you may put a goblin creature card from your hand onto the battlefield.
Well, that's from your hand, not from your library.
Exactly, and it doesn't trigger off of anybody else. So I was going to say, Warren Instigator is a card that people used to try to make work in Modern a lot, or work generally in different shells. And this card is better than that, even though it's templated in a similar way. Like, there's a lot of things that make this one better, because you can drop this and then attack with your team and then get the exile costs, or not exile costs, get the exile benefits. You can, like you said, play this into an open board and hope that you get in for 1 and be able to draw some more cards. The goblins deck isn't really about this.
That's my thing. It's right? It's like combo deck versus like sort of a creature card advantage deck most of the time, right?
But yeah, I mean, I think it is when I've played it. But maybe there's, I think this card works enough that maybe this could make goblins be different or have a different backup plan or something like that.
Yeah, I think it's too good to like not see at least experimentation. Like I've seen differing opinions. Like I'm not a goblin main here, but like I've seen people say that it's like the second best 2-drop goblin since who's the bug-eyed guy that makes stuff happen?
Snoop.
Yeah, Snoop. So makes Snoop best thing since Snoop. I've heard other people say, yeah, not a thing, but I think we'll see, and I'm sure that it'll show up in some 75s and 5.0 lists, and people will make some stuff happen with it. My friends, we've been going for longer than I expected about Lord of the Rings cards, but
you don't say.
Who knew? Shane, 4 years later, you should learn that we can go all day.
Yeah. There's a few more cards I think we could even talk about, right? Like Boromir, who is actually a fairly boring reason that he's good. He stops free spells from being cast.
Don't get into it right now. Don't get into it.
Fine. There's stuff. There's a few more things we could talk about, but we have
Born Upon a Wind.
We
There's
have
a lot
to
of
get out.
cards.
We have to get out of here. We've got to do our ad break, and then we've got to come back to talk about the RC in Dallas, Pioneer RC that happened this past weekend. So stay with us. My friends, we are all together to talk about grooming products from Barrister and Mann. Have you been grooming? It's summer. You got to stay clean.
You might be able to see that my beard is a little bit more trimmed.
Yeah, it looks really
than
good.
usual.
Looks good, Dave.
Little grown in, a little bit. I'm using the beard oils as I do.
I have been, as always, enjoying shaving, and I am eagerly anticipating the summer scents, I guess we could call them, from Barrister and Mann. We've got Presto and Adagio. We have mentioned these in recent weeks, but they're fully out. See the packaging on the website, and Adagio especially, I think, is kind of like very summer focused. It's all about like biology, natural beauty. You've got, flower blossoms, you've got fruits, you've got like this is going for like a cool green fruit scent, which sounds like dope to me. Lime, cherry, violet leaf absolute. That's one of my favorite cocktails, by the way. Lily of the Valley, floral musk called Galaxolide. I really hated when I went up against Galaxolide in Final Fantasy IX, but
I was thinking more about Marvel Snap.
Oh yeah, Galaxolide, you're right. Galaxolide. That's the newest Series 5 card in Marvel Snap. But yeah, and this even has a light bit of menthol. Not super cold, but enough to refresh the face in swelteringly hot weather of summer. Yeah, Adagio sounds dope. And Presto does too. It says the other side of the coin from Adagio. Leather, violet leaf, etc. So those are two things that I'm definitely excited about trying. What have you all been using from Barrister and Mann recently, besides the beard oil? Which beard oil do you use, by the way, Dave?
I go back and forth between Sandalwood and Seville still are my favorite ones.
Seville's dope.
They're big bottles, so they take a little bit of time to get through.
Yeah.
Which is great. Good value for your money. Stan, any thoughts on our friends at Barrister and Mann for summer?
So here's the thing about my relationship with Barrister and Mann. I literally just grab what's around, and I will use any fragrance because I'm yet to find one that I dislike. Which I don't know if that's like a cop-out or not, but it's just like when I finish a soap, I just grab whatever other Barrister and Mann soap I have, and I use that, and I'm happy. And I have more brand loyalty than scent loyalty at this point.
I think it's a great point, Stan. I think that should give people confidence to just try something out, because I agree with you. I haven't had one that I haven't liked yet either. And it's not because they all smell the same. I just want to be clear. They are different experiences, but they're all wonderful, surprising things that happen. And I think it's spring, early summer, spring. You know what it's time for, everybody? It's time to take a chance. Take a chance on life. Take a chance on scents. And yourself, And
how can they do that, David?
They can do that by going to barristermann.com right now and using the Dive Down M23, to get 15% off your first purchase. Please go check them out. They've been a longtime sponsor of ours at this point. Great products, and we appreciate you.
Stanislav, you're still with us.
Yeah, I'm back, baby. I've just been sitting at my computer waiting for the time zones to line up again.
Yep. What are we doing?
Looking at this pile of Magic cards that I have. So,
Did you open a pack?
I mean, I have so many packs. I'm constantly opening packs.
Can we get a pack ruffle noise in the microphone to signify we've entered this segment?
Yeah, so I have a very special pack. It might sound a little different. As you may know, I was in Germany a couple weeks ago.
Right.
I was in Hamburg. I caught a mysterious disease, probably from the hamburger I ate, which was delicious. And I borrowed a scooter. I rented one of the scooters that they have around cities in the world these days. And I scooted to a LGS, and I bought Aftermath packs.
In German?
No, in English.
On Deutsch?
9 in English.
Okay.
5 packs for €20. It was a deal I couldn't pass up.
They even knew then. Let's see what we get. I hope you get a Nissa.
So let's open as many of these as we can in the next 60 seconds. They have more than one rare. Copper Code Vanguard. That's actually a pretty good card.
You love it.
Markov Baron. Don't know what that is. Okay, here's first rare. Oh no, this one only has one rare, and it's Spark Rupture. 2 and a white. When it enters, draw a card. Each planeswalker with 1 or more loyalty counters loses all abilities and is a creature with power and toughness equal to the number of loyalty counters on it. Hey, and speaking of a card we just talked about today, foil Cosmic Rebirth.
There you go. Give me the text. Is it comes into play, returns to the battlefield if it's 3 or less?
Choose target permanent card in your graveyard. If it has mana value 3 or less, you may put it onto the battlefield. If you don't put it onto the battlefield, put it onto your hand. You gain 3 life.
There you go.
Cool. All right. Only one rare. Let's get one more rare. Let's open another pack.
I love it.
Because we're nasty. Do these packs sound different?
They sound tinny.
Yeah, they do. Could be the microphone.
Okay. Reckless Handling, Goldforged Thopteryx. Okay. We got a mythic called Karn Legacy Reforged.
Oh, wow. That card is not good.
Bummer.
Sorry, Karn.
Hey, we got another rare. It's called Vesuvan Drifter.
Oh, yeah. That was a card you two liked.
It's foil. That's too bad. And then we got a beautiful Filter Out. It's not a fun card, but it's a fun frame.
Nice.
How about that?
Lovely.
How about that, Apple?
Thanks for opening some packs, Dan. And it's good to get 3 more minutes of Stanislav in my life.
Exactly.
I'm not joking. I open just a random pack every day now because I just have so many packs laying around.
Oh, this guy, Dave, with the sealed product.
What? You guys don't have a ton of packs laying around?
We don't have a ton of. No, we don't have the PR hookups that you have, Stan.
Ooh, bummer.
Somehow.
You know, we've built this brand together, and Stan gets the free packs because he's in Europe.
Apparently, there's fewer content creators over there.
But also has used his journalism background to actually get affiliated with a real news organization and not us. So
not the fake news organization. Okay, so I think what is our plan for the rest of the episode that we're just going to be really efficient with our RC breakdown?
Yes.
Okay. Cool. Love it. But Stanislav, it was good to see you. Get out of here. Enjoy the rest of your day.
All right, should we do the goodbye, or do you guys want to do it yourself?
No, I'm gonna keep that. I'm gonna keep that close to the chest. That's mine.
All right. Well,
close to the vest, underneath the vest.
Maybe I'll see you next week. If not you, the co-host, maybe you, the listener, maybe neither. We'll find out.
Enjoy the rest of your Sunday, Stanislav.
Ciao.
Bye.
Well, Dave, we're finally rid of him. It's just me and you.
Finally. Just the two of us for one segment on this week.
No, it's you and me get. It takes 2 to make a thing go right.
Right, that's right.
It takes 2 to break down a tournament.
Yeah. Several tournaments, Shane. Once again, I asked you for a tight 10. And what we have is 10 pages of notes instead of 10 minutes of notes.
No, it's not.
How's this going to work?
It's going to work great. I mean, I don't really have 10 tournaments. So, I mean, this past weekend, there were Pioneer Regional Championships, RCs, in the U.S., down in Dallas. There was one in China. There was one in Canada. There was one in Southeast Asia, Mexico, probably other places. But we're going to focus on the largest one of all of those by a good margin, the one in Dallas. I think the other tournaments might provide some important information we can work with. Like if we want to get in the weeds ntgmeta.io has a really handy feature of combining various events. So like if you wanted to, you could click like all 5 of those events and look at the combined win rate and matchup percentages across all those tournaments, which was kind of handy because you could just be like, well, I mean, the U.S. has like 1,100 something people, but if I add in these...
The U.S. only has 1,100 people?
Yeah, I mean, 1,174.
In the entire U.S.?
Well, I meant in the tournament.
Oh, okay.
And if you want to throw in those other tournaments, you can do so just for some more color or interest if you want. But, yeah, like I said, we'll focus on the U.S. one. I think, personally, this was probably the most important weekend for Pioneer since the Pro Tour. Mm-hmm. I think it, and ultimately to me, revealed some really significant opportunities Pioneer players have and are taking advantage of for new angles of attack, new opportunities in the metagame, and I think also somewhat solidified perhaps the new tier, the tiering of the decks, or at least informed what those, the various tiers might kind of be.
Okay. Well, I'm super interested in that because the new tiering is the thing that I'm always skeptical about coming out of these kind of events when people meta really hard and manage to read it right and get those bumping win rates. So let's see what happened. So tell me about what happened.
Okay.
What happened?
Okay, 1174 players in Dallas, which means 14 rounds of Swiss. There was the usual 9 rounds on Saturday. All the people 6 and 3 came back for day 2. And so the overall metagame of Dallas, we have a nice even 10 decks with over 3% of the metagame. And those decks are, Dave, guess the first 2.
I mean, no guesses here. It's Rakdos Midrange and Mono Green Devotion. Everybody knows it.
Yes.
Rakdos Midrange, the big surprise to me here, Rakdos Midrange was 21% of the meta. Yeah. 21%. And we thought that the tournament that Devin and I talked about in Valencia was going to be an outlier where it was 25% of the meta.
Yeah.
This is still 21. And then Mono Green Devotion.
People love that Rakdos, my friend.
They do. And then Mono Green Devotion, 11% of the meta with 133 people.
Yeah.
Here it is.
Let's go through the metagame pretty quickly. Then we can talk about, or do you want to do win rates as we go through the metagame?
Always want to do win rates as we go through. In context, fine. Shane, in context.
Very well. Rakdos mid-range, 46.9% across. This is always a thing where I'm just like, if it was let's say it was an NRG, let's say it was like an SCG Open back in the day, right? And it's just like, okay, Shane Beeps goes to the event and he's going to bring Rakdos mid-range and he's not very good at it. And that's the kind of thing where we see like, okay, 47%, yeah, sure, there's going to be some very good players, going to be not so good players.
Right.
And this is the kind of thing where all these players are likely quite good. They all had to qualify. They had to get through their RCQs to make it to the RC. And we still saw 47%, which is not amazing. Of course, it's the kind of thing where you're going to have a lot of mirror matches. It's the kind of thing where you're going to have everyone expecting you in the room. But you don't bring a deck like this if you didn't expect everyone to be prepared for you in the first place. You just kind of think the natural power level of the deck's going to push you over the edge. But did not happen today.
Yeah. How about Mono Green?
Yeah, Mono Green Devotion, however, 53.7%. So
it's not bad.
No, I mean, that's darn good. I mean, especially across 133 pilots. And you had to know people, again, were going to be prepared for you, thinking that you were probably going to be one of the top 3 decks in the room. And I think it's a pretty convincing stance for Mono Green Devotion. I mean, the main thing I noticed looking at the Mono Green Devotion lists is these are really simplified lists again. There's no...
What's the simple version of Mono Green Devotion? Just curious. What do you mean?
I mean, I think it has been for quite some time, but I think last time we really were talking about Mono Green is like some people are doing that Teferi thing or an infinite combo. Some people are using the is it Niv Mizzet who takes over the other people's Planeswalker abilities?
That would be a Bolas.
Yes, Bolas.
Yeah, that would be the Bolas Planeswalker.
But now it's just the kind of the version before Teferi and Nicol Bolas came into play. And there are usually a couple Pelucanos, 2 to 3, to provide just that quality game, I think, against Rakdos. It has reach for things like perhaps Spirits, perhaps Greasefang, just those kind of things to shore up a few weaknesses that the deck formerly had. But really, it's not trying to do anything, fancy. It just has the Pestilent Cauldron in the sideboard. It has the Chain Veil in the sideboard for wishing up with Karn, and just gets things done, both on the ground and with the combo.
There's plenty of things to combo off with. I don't even think they really use Teferi anymore at the Pro Tour, for what it's worth.
No.
All right, so that's our top tier. It's two decks, 33%.
Yeah, in terms of representation, yes.
There's 4 decks between that 11% from mono green and 5%. Can you tell me about the 4 decks, which I would call our next tier, basically?
Sure. Is it Creativity? I'm a little bit surprised to see this in third place, but maybe not. 7.5%. And what's really interesting here is I'm still seeing a surprising mix of versions that have Atraxa, that have Gearhulk, that have Worldspine Worm. Sometimes the Worldspine Worm does not have Xenagos, which I don't even really know what you're doing with that. I thought that was kind of the combo. I don't play Is It Creativity combo decks. And people didn't really seem solidified on one or the other. I even went down from like the best performing to like the mid performing decks, and I saw a mix all in there. I don't think any one deck performed particularly better than the other. And overall, these decks performed pretty subpar with about a 43.9% win rate across the 88 pilots.
I'll say that's the lowest win rate of these top 10 decks that we have that we're looking at right now, 43.9%.
That is true. But then the next was the deck I might have picked as the third most popular in the room, and it's really not fourth by much. It's just 87 copies instead of 88, and that's Azorius Control, 7.44%, a 48.9% win rate. Very Azorius Control things. I think it's the kind of thing where, if you plan your sideboard, plan your deck quite well, maybe you'll gain a few percentage points, maybe you just have a few tough matchups, and you go down a little bit. It's kind of like, the middle of the road control deck that we've seen recently spike tournaments. It won one of the tournaments not in the US, so it's perfectly viable, of course. It just didn't blow the doors off here in Dallas.
Yep. Also did not blow the doors off of it in Valencia, for what it's worth, after having a matchup in the finals of the Energy tournament about 3 or 4 weeks ago. So a mirror matchup, I guess I meant.
Yeah, exactly. Next up, Abzan Greasefang, 74 copies, 6.3%, a 50.5% win rate. Greasefang just keeps doing Greasefang things. I think everyone's planning to see this in like the top 5 or 6 decks, and perfectly viable deck. Maybe not the thing you're going to bring to spike the tournament necessarily, but Abzan Greasefang still here.
Yeah, I mean, I actually think this is kind of the deck that, at least according to Devin and what we talked about last week when we were talking about his choice of playing Boros Convoke, is that he actually is kind of favoring these high roll decks in Pioneer lately, and Abzan is an ultimate high roll deck, kind of. I think it has a combo goes off, wins you the game. You try to sneak your way through the bad matchups and hope that you kind of thread the needle and do better than the mean win rate among your crew. But if you can roll well, you can Greasefang people to death.
For sure. I think there's another deck or two that we'll talk about that I think had perhaps more even win rates across more decks than Greasefang did, but didn't necessarily spike quite as hard. Yeah, a little bit of a tease. Up next, 66 copies, mono white humans, 5.6% of the meta, and a nice 53.1% win rate. So I kind of thought we might see a little bit more mono white humans in the metagame. Like if I was forced to guess, I might have swapped Greasefang with mono white humans. It's not a tremendous difference, but enough of one to make a note of, I suppose.
All right, so that's our tier 2, decks above 5%, between 5 and 10% of the meta. So coming in at the end, we have decks above 3% of the meta, between 3 and 5. And what are those 3 decks?
Boros Convoke, 56%, about 4.8% of the meta, a 47% win rate across the day. A little bit less than we might have expected, although I feel like people pretty quickly prepared to face this deck. They probably had a few new sideboard cards. A sideboard card I noticed in someone's deck, I forget which one, it's that, I think Stan mentioned this in one of our spoiler episodes. It's like the 1 mana sorcery that deals 1 damage to all your opponent's creatures and all their planeswalkers. Mm-hmm. And that seems ridiculously efficient against a tokens deck where you're like, you don't have to wait till turn 3 as long as you get them before they start convoking out and getting tokens on them and things like that. They could pretty much clear a board.
Well, yeah, you kind of have to get it turn 1.
Sure.
Because a lot of times they're convoking out Loxodon on turn 2, and then you can't kill their guys anymore. But there are also plenty of draws where that doesn't happen. So,
yeah. Lotus Field combo, 46 copies, about 3.9%, with a 48.8% win rate. This is a little bit surprising. I think some people might have thought that Lotus Field could spike because people weren't quite as well prepared for it. It's been dipping in the metagame percentages a little bit. Again, we see it here with only 3.9. You might think it's going to be a little bit higher at an event such as this, just because there's a lot of people who might be deck experts. But this is kind of where I expect to see Lotus Field right now, which is like, 3 to 5% and maybe getting 48 to 52% of the of a win rate.
Finally, the last one of these top 10s, we have what I think a lot of people thought was the
9.
hero. Oh, 9. This is 9. Okay.
Which is also a hero.
Yeah. Tell me about it.
Azorius Spirits, 38 copies, 3.25% of the meta, 57% win rate.
Huge.
So, huge. And these decks aren't doing anything particularly new. They're just kind of the heavily blue-based disruptive aggro decks.
Yeah.
4 Curious Obsessions for your power, for your card draw. You got your Geistlight Snare, you got your Slip Out the Backs, you got your Lofty Denials. You splash into white for like some maybe main deck, like stuff like Spell Queller, your sideboard options. I'm seeing an interesting new option. No, it's not new, but it's a new to me in these decks, which is like 1 to 2 of Catilda, Dawnheart Martyr, which is a 1 white star with flying, lifelink, pro vampire, and power and toughness equal to the number of spirits or enchantments you control.
I only like pro vampires.
And she has a flip side, which is like the Rising Dawn 3 white enchantment. That is what is that called when you cast it from graveyard in the Crimson Vow set?
Spirity. I don't remember what it's called. Yeah, you're bringing it back.
Yeah. I think, and just puts that same text that she has on another creature. 4 Wedding Announcement is a big reason, I think, to run white for like the Rakdos matchup and the board. You get your Portable Holes, your Destroy Evils, your Skyclave Apparitions, your Invasion of Gobakon I saw a few copies of for sure.
On Twitter today, a lot of people were talking about how good Invasion of Gobakon was out of the sideboard.
Yeah, it's a good cardboard.
Yeah, that in fact, I saw one person claim that they never lost a game where they flipped it, that let them beat Rakdos a bunch more than they were used to. I think that, Gobakon, people thought it was really good in Boros Convoke. Turns out, maybe it was just really good in Spirits all along.
I mean, we did say it's a good card. We thought it was going to see play. We weren't the only people to say that, of course, and I think that it's proving to be a particularly useful card for sure in these creature decks that can run white for sure. I think we'll talk a little bit more about Azorius Spirits when we get in kind of like final thoughts. So let's head into our number 10, Rakdos Sacrifice. 3.16%, 37 copies, a 56.3% win rate. And basically no one I saw ran the new Nixilis creature version in the deck. I did see a few adversaries in the sideboard, which, as we've mentioned a long time ago, it's particularly strong against control decks. It's pretty good for grinding things out long term. But yeah, I think Rakdos Sacrifice is still just doing kind of what it does, and we can talk a little bit about what matchups it's particularly good in. But 56.3 for Raksack is pretty darn strong.
Pretty good. Yeah, I remember that there were a lot of people saying that they were surprised by how much Raksack was around and how much it was at the top tables.
Yeah. So overall thoughts about the meta, Dave?
I mean, I think we hit most of it. The biggest thing is that whenever we go into one of these events, I'm always like, is Spirits going to be good? And, Stan has been playing Spirits, has thought that Spirits was his best deck in Pioneer, and suddenly here it is again at the top of a meta as well.
Yeah.
That's the biggest surprise to me. I guess the other one is it Creativity's low win rate, given how much Creativity had been getting hype over the last few weeks? To see it down in the low 40s like that is pretty surprising.
Yeah, for sure. This, to me, kind of solidifies Mono Green Devotion as just being back, baby. Like it's just here. I think that it's regained some of its strength. I think people have streamlined the builds again to just be simple and powerful and get done what they need to get done. And I think Pelucanos, of course, does offer a lot of strength, especially as we're seeing spirits make a little bit of a comeback, and Greasefang continues to fall a little bit. It's probably pretty strong against things like mono white humans, and so it's just a overall strong card for mono green.
All right. So I don't know. We have the day 2 conversion stats here. I don't think we have to go through all of them, but let's talk about the headlines here. What were the things that converted the best? What were the things that had the most interesting matchups when you take a look at like MTG Meta IO and stuff like that for the matchup grid?
Sure. So let's just say, I think an expected conversion rate, if every deck performed equally well, would have been about like 22%, because 283 players made day 2, which is 22% of the starting meta. So anything over 22 is a little bit better than average. So Mono Green Devotion, 35% conversion rate. It made up 16.6% of the day 2 meta, up from 11.3.
Oof, that is kind of wild.
Yeah, right. Azoria Spirits, which we just were talking about, a 42% conversion rate, 16 of the 38 pilots made day 2. That's pretty darn good. Racksack was 35% conversion rate. Enigmatic Fires, a deck we did not mention earlier because it was like the 11th place deck, but it shot into the top 11 decks that made up day 2. In fact, I should say that all top 10 decks were part of the top 10 of day 2, and then Enigmatic Fires got in there to get back up to 4.2% of the overall metagame. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of like, those are the outliers. Some stuff did a little bit worse, some stuff did a little bit better, like Rakdos Midrange basically converted at a 22% rate, which is kind of exactly what you'd expect. Yes, exactly. Yeah. So here's the thing that I thought was interesting. Other made up 25.7% of the day 1, but it only made up 15% of day 2. So all of these kind of rogue strategies, other strategies that didn't make it into our top 10, top 11 decks, definitely performed a little bit worse. Some of the decks that were in other that I think performed particularly well, though, that I did want to mention is Gruul Vehicles. 5 of the 20 pilots made day 2. Neoform Atraxa, 4 of the 13. Sultai Rona combo, 4 of the 15. Those all did pretty darn well. And then some decks like Omnath to Light were pretty bad, like 12%. Is it Phoenix, only 1 of the 13 pilots. How far it has fallen.
Mm-hmm. It's really at the bottom, the nadir right now. Don't know why.
It's too bad. So there's our day 2 meta. And I was thinking we just go straight to the top 8, and then we can just kind of give our overall thoughts, other interesting things from other RCs, and then just takeaways that people might take with them in their thoughts about Pioneer moving forward.
Exactly.
Until, Dave, we can hopefully start thinking about Modern again. I miss Modern. We've been talking so much about Pioneer.
It's time. It's time for Lord of the Rings. It's Modern time.
So, top 8 time. Elliot Raff and Enigmatic Fires went 12-0-2 undefeated.
Yeah.
This looks like a Fires deck to me.
Elliot Raff, well-known L3 judge, and generally, supposedly all-around nice guy, though I've never interacted with them. So,
congrats, Elliot. Second place, Bradley Schlesinger on Gruul Vehicles, 12-1-1. So the cool tech here were 3 Voldaren Thrillseeker, which is that 2 in a red, 1/1 with backup 2, and it can put 2 1/1 counters on a target creature. If that's a different creature, that creature then gains the ability to pay 1, sacrifice, and deal damage equal to its power to any target.
It's the fling card. It's the
fling card. And I mean, so there's definitely some utility here, right? Like you have a lot of creatures with pretty good power. Like let's say you do this to a Lovestruck Beast, right? Like you get the 1/1 from Voldaren Thrillseeker. It puts 2 counters on Lovestruck Beast. It can attack, and then you could just fling it.
Pay 1 to dome it, so you can maybe do 14 on an empty board or something weird like that.
I mean, like there's some cool stuff that can happen here. I have to see this to believe it. Like it seems expensive to me, but like maybe it's just the kind of thing where it just puts enough counters and enough things that it matters, where it's just like it really just puts your creatures out of range of burn. It puts your creatures out of range of other annoying creatures that can match up against like your Lovestruck Beast or something like that. So
yep. And then you said it also had a couple of Invasion of Ixalan, which is a pretty well-costed battle that turns into a good creature.
Yeah. perfectly good. Lets you dig through your deck a little bit. Third placed, Toph Robinson on Dimir Rogues, 12-2. No Fairy Mastermind here, but does have 3 Invasion of Amonkhet, which is like ETBs. They mill 3 cards. Your opponent discards a card. You draw a card. It has defense 4, and then it flips into Lazatep Convert, which ETBs as a copy of any creature in a graveyard, except it's a 4/4 black zombie in addition to its other types. So, yeah, why not?
So I think the people here were trying to cheese out like Atraxas with the with the Lazatep Convert. So you get somebody to mill their payoff or kill their payoff, and then you get to copy it. It's not as big, but you get to do all the flying vigilance, lifelinky kind of stuff. So
sweet. Matt Foreman in 4th place on Racksack, 12-2. What you'd expect. All these decks down the top 8 are what you'd expect, in my opinion. Philip Marr, 5th place on Azoria Spirits, 12-2. Connor Lane on Mono Blue Spirits, 11-2-1. Donald Sheldon on Racksack, 11-2-1. And Dewey Vu on Mono Green Devotion, 11-2-1.
So you're telling me this top 8 had 1 Azoria Spirits, 1 Mono Blue Spirits, and a Rogues deck?
And 2 Racksack, my friend.
And 2 Racksack.
And Gruul Vehicles, Enigmatic Fires, and Mono Green Devotion. No Rakdos midrange, no Azorius Control, no Creativity.
No Lotus.
And
interesting top 8.
In the finals, Bradley Schlesinger took it with Gruul Vehicles over Matt Foreman on Racksack.
It's the finals that everyone saw coming. So Gruul Vehicles has been on the downswing really big lately, and it's interesting to see it pop up here. It didn't have a great conversion rate. I'm going to assume that meant it also other pilots that ran it didn't have a great win rate day one either, did they?
No, it had a good conversion rate, but only like 20 players. Like 5 of the 20 made day 2.
Okay, so it was it was slightly above the expected conversion rate. It was 25% instead of 22%.
Yeah, you're right. It's pretty good.
Yeah.
I think the things that I imagine it's good at are still probably good against Rakdos midrange, and I imagine that it can probably do a pretty good fight against other creature decks just because it sort of can outclass them, outsize them. But, your guess is as good as mine.
Yeah. Interesting when stuff like this happens, though.
Yeah, I don't have the the Gruul deck did not have enough players to even make it on MTG meta, the breakdown. So it's not like we can even look at the performance there.
All right. What else happened from the other?
Yeah, some interesting stuff. Canada had 264 players. The top 8 also had 2 Racksack.
Okay.
Our buddy and host of Dominaria's Judgment, Dom Harvey, made it to the quarters with Mono Green Devotion. Derek Pite, a.k.a. Misplaced Ginger, made it to the semis on, of course, Rakdos midrange. So good Canadian players are still good. And in the finals there, Azorius Control. Oh, there it is. Defeated Azorius Spirits. There it is in the finals.
All right, more spirits.
Mexico had 162 players. Grease Fang won over Gruul Vehicles, also showing up there. I will mention a Dimir Rona combo deck made the top 8 there. It had Scheming Symmetry in it. It had a couple other interesting inclusions. I think that was a pretty wild build. Southeast Asia, for a final tournament to mention, had 155 players, and 5 color Enigmatic Fires defeated Azorius Control in the finals, and a 4-color Omnath Elementals deck made the top 8.
Boom.
Okay.
Lots of interesting stuff. All right. Yeah, what are your takeaways, Shane?
Man, biggest takeaways, Convoke did not Hogak its way to victory. It had a sub 50% win rate. It looked strong against Lotus, looked strong against Rakdos, but apparently little else it's really not overwhelming those. I think Rakdos is a great deck to be good against.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that Convoke at least looks like it is a deck in the format that you can play still. Yeah. Even with the win rate not being crushing or anything like that, it still was. Now it's over a large sample size where it was still coming in at like 48, 47% overall win rate. That means it's probably going to have weeks where it's good. It's going to have weeks where it's better, but it's interesting to see that it's likely a real deck in the format still. Just maybe wasn't the breakout story of this tournament.
Yeah, I think based on the win rate matchups, I think its opportunities are shoring up its matchups against Mono Green Devotion and Mono White Humans, which are kind of like mid 40s. And Azorius Spirit, so that makes a comeback, is also kind of a mid-40s matchup. So
Right.
if it can think about ways to get a little bit better there without losing too much against like Lotus and Rakdos mid-range and things like that, I think the deck will be in a little bit better spot. So maybe people can continue to tune it. And then another thing I think was, I do have to point out Rakdos mid does show up again, does perform below average. I don't know if this is like mass delusion. I don't know if it's just like, I just don't know. People play it because they want the flexible, potentially powerful mid-range deck, and it never seems to like overly impress.
We've talked about it a lot. I don't know what to say. Like, there's plenty of people who do it well with it and people who do bad with it, and it converts where it's supposed to convert. It's like if you want to have a chance, you can play this, and you'll have a chance.
Sure. And then finally, let's talk a little bit about Azorius Spirit some more. Like, I think this just showed itself to be like a potentially slept-on deck that a lot of people seem to suddenly converge on before this tournament. Like, even against Mono Green Devotion, we've mentioned Pelucranos probably being helpful against flyers with reach, but it still had a 61% win rate against Mono Green. It had decent to great matchups against basically everything except for creativity and against sacrifice. And I think that's a perfectly good place to be if you're going to continue performing in that manner.
Yeah, I mean, I always want spirits to be pretty good. I'm glad it's back. I'm sure Stan will be thrilled when he takes a look at this and listens to this.
Any thoughts you have, Dave?
I mean, the only other thing is just Racksack, which I don't think we underlined quite enough, is that if you like that deck, you can definitely play it. Keep playing it. It's once again, we have a kind of big size tournament where it overperforms a little bit, kind of what people think it's going to. So,
yeah, I mean, again, I've mentioned so many times, I think Racksack is one of those decks that's a contender in the format against pretty specific metagames. Mm-hmm. Like, this did that expected check against the creature decks, against Rakdos midrange, and it was a slight but fairly convincing underdog against the combo decks. So like if the combo decks slip a little bit, or if you can think about ways to continue to shore up those matchups, then I think Racksack's going to be fine for you. Like if, thinking about what I would play, like at a Pioneer event coming up, like, do you get good at Racksack? Like, I think at LGS meta especially is like, I'm going to see fewer combo decks. I'm going to see more creature decks, in my opinion. And I think Racksack is going to be fun to play, interactive, lots of things to keep track of, and probably pretty good against those strategies. Probably gonna have a lot of Convoke players at your LGS recently if they're buying the cheap cards, formerly cheap cards.
Right.
But other than that, I think like Mono Green Devotion is something that I'd pick up and play because once you kind of learn the mana points that you have to be at to do certain combo lines, I think you're pretty fine. Other than that, it's like, slightly on rails to be pretty decent with it, I think.
Yeah. No surprise to anyone, but I would be playing spirits after this week. Why not hop on the train out of a deck I already like pretty well? Yeah, it is what it is. Give me spirits. Yeah.
So I mean, long story short, I think that the metagame of Pioneer is still pretty flexible. I mean, we saw a deck that got created like 3 weeks ago be 5% of the meta.
Yeah.
And then we saw the return of Azorius Spirits and things like that. So we're seeing the uptick in Mono Green Devotion, the uptick of Mono White Humans. I think there's a lot of opportunity for people to play what they want and for the format to continue developing and shape itself via the players.
Yep. All right. Well, Shane, thanks for taking us through this wrap up of the week's RCs.
A half
as we
hour.
kind of cease such harsh focus on Pioneer for a little bit. Get ready to go back to Modern, as you said. But I think that's it for this week's show, right?
Oh, yeah. And that wraps it up. So if you have not yet, subscribe to our podcast. You get those latest episodes as soon as they drop. And if you use Apple Podcasts, leave us a rating, leave us a review. If you use Spotify, you can leave us some stars over there as well. If you want to shoot a question our way, you want to give us a piece of your mind, you can tweet us at The Dive Down or email thedivedown@gmail.com. If you want to support the show, head on over to our Patreon at patreon.com/thedivedown. You can also check out our merch store at thedivedown.com/store. Of course, manatraders.com. We've worked with them for so long. If you want to use their service and you want to save 10% off your first 2 months of renting Magic Online cards, you can use promo code TheDiveDown2023, all one word. Gives you 10% off there. If you want to get some amazing shaving soaps, body soaps, fragrances, and more at Barrister and Man, you can use code TheDiveDownM23 for 15% off your first order there. And our friends over at Nerd Rage Gaming give the Dive Down listeners 8% off their order with the code DIVE8. Thanks Nowhere, thanks Spaceblood for letting us use your music. And until next week, get out there and be tempted by the ring.